Have you ever wondered what happens when a teacher's authority goes too far? What if a student's quest for justice turns into something unexpected? Can a single act in a classroom spark a chain of events that no one saw coming? And how does a community react when lines between right and wrong blur? Have you ever thought about what would happen if a teacher crossed the line in the classroom? What if that one act of power went too far and a student decided it was time to take justice into her own hands? Could one small action set off a ripple effect, changing everything for everyone involved? And in a world where authority and respect are constantly tested, where do we draw the line between discipline and abuse of power? In today's story, we dive into a shocking event that took place in an ordinary classroom, where one teacher's actions went way beyond what anyone expected. In the middle of a routine school day, a teacher seized a black student's phone and, without warning, smashed it right there in front of the class. What followed was something that no one in that room could have predicted, a quest for justice that was as unexpected as it was ruthless. This isn't just a story about a broken phone. It's about a student who found herself in an unimaginable situation, one that pushed her to act in ways no one saw coming. You'll learn about the events that unfolded after that dramatic moment, the complex emotions and reactions from everyone involved, and how a single, seemingly small incident exposed issues much deeper than anyone could have imagined. Stay with us as we reveal the hidden layers of this story, unpack the impact on the school and the community, and explore the challenging questions around authority, respect, and the power of standing up for what you believe in. Because this isn't just about one teacher and one student. There's more to the story than what happened in that classroom. As we dig deeper, you'll hear about hidden tensions, surprising reactions, and how a quest for justice can sometimes take a life of its own. There are details that never made it to the news, pieces of this puzzle that only those close to the situation knew. And today, we're bringing them all to light. So if you think you know how this story goes, think again. By the end of this video, you'll understand not only what happened, but also the bigger picture behind it. And you might even start to question where you stand on issues of authority and justice in our schools. Make sure to watch until the end, because this story is packed with twists, turns, and a final reveal that will leave you thinking long after the video ends. It was an ordinary Tuesday morning in Miss Thompson's classroom. The students were sitting in rows, their desks covered in notebooks and pens. The quiet hum of whispers and the scratch of pencils filled the room. In the back row, Aisha sat quietly, glancing down at her phone every now and then, her face tense and distracted. She had just received a text from her mother, who wasn't feeling well. Worried, Aisha wanted to check in, but she knew Miss Thompson had a strict no-phone policy. Ms. Thompson was known around the school as a no-nonsense teacher. She believed in discipline and respect, and she didn't tolerate interruptions of any kind. To her, the classroom was sacred ground where learning came first. Any sign of distraction was a threat to the order she worked so hard to maintain. So when her gaze fell upon Aisha's phone, her face tightened. She marched over to the back row, her footsteps echoing through the silent room. Without warning, Miss Thompson reached down and snatched the phone from Aisha's hand. The entire class froze. Aisha's eyes widened in shock, her hand still midair, as if she could somehow reach out and take her phone back. Miss Thompson didn't say a word. Her silence spoke louder than anything. She walked to the front of the class, holding the phone up for everyone to see, her face a mask of determination. And then, in a moment that no one could have predicted, Miss Thompson did something that shocked everyone. She lifted the phone and smashed it against the edge of her desk. The sound of shattering glass echoed through the room, and the class gasped as shards scattered across the floor. Aisha's heart raced. She couldn't believe what she had just seen. This wasn't just her phone. It was her connection to her mom, her lifeline, especially on days like this when things at home were tough. The room filled with a tense, suffocating silence. Every student sat motionless, too afraid to say a word. Aisha felt a mixture of emotions flooding through her: shock, humiliation, anger, She felt like the world had stopped, like everyone in the room was staring straight at her, judging her, her face flushed with embarrassment. But underneath that was something deeper, a feeling of betrayal. How could her teacher, someone meant to guide and protect, do something so harsh? Ms. Thompson, still holding the now broken phone, looked at Aisha with a stern expression. She said, "This is what happens when rules are broken." Her voice was calm but cold, almost as if she believed she was teaching Aisha a valuable lesson. But to Aisha, it felt like anything but a lesson. It felt personal, like a punishment designed not just to enforce a rule, but to make her feel small and powerless. As the class ended, Aisha gathered her things, trying to keep her composure. She wanted to cry, to scream, but she held back, refusing to let her classmates see how much this affected her. The phone was gone, and with it, her connection to the outside world, at least for that day. Walking out of the classroom, she could feel the stares of her classmates on her back, whispers trailing behind her. They were all talking about what had just happened, and she could hear snippets of their conversations, words like too far, harsh, and unfair. The incident spread quickly through the school. By lunchtime, almost everyone had heard about it. Students who barely knew Aisha were discussing the event in the hallways, expressing their opinions on whether Ms. Thompson had gone too far. Some students agreed with the teacher, arguing that rules needed to be followed and that phones had no place in the classroom. Others were outraged, saying that Ms. Thompson's actions were extreme, even cruel. A few of Aisha's friends tried to console her, but she felt a loneliness she hadn't known before. It was as if a line had been drawn, and she was standing on one side, alone, while everyone else debated her situation. The teachers, too, began to talk. Some defended Miss Thompson, citing her years of dedication to the school and her reputation for maintaining order. They argued that perhaps her actions, though intense, were meant to teach respect. But others, especially the younger teachers, questioned the appropriateness of smashing a student's property. Was this truly the best way to teach a lesson? Had Miss Thompson crossed a line that shouldn't have been crossed? As Aisha walked home that afternoon, her mind was a storm of emotions. She replayed the scene over and over, each time feeling a fresh wave of anger and embarrassment. But beneath it all was a newfound resolve. She had always respected authority, always followed the rules. But this felt different. This felt wrong. For the first time, she questioned whether respect was a one-way street or if it was something that needed to be mutual, something earned and given back. The days after the incident were a whirlwind of whispers and stares. The story spread like wildfire through the school. By now, everyone knew about Miss Thompson smashing Aisha's phone, and everyone had an opinion. Hallways buzzed with conversation as students exchanged glances, wondering what might happen next. Some still defended the teacher, saying rules are rules, while others felt a sharp sense of injustice on Aisha's behalf. But in every corner of the school, one question lingered: would there be any consequences for Miss Thompson? Aisha felt the weight of it all each time she walked through those halls. Friends offered her quiet nods of support. Even students she barely knew stopped to ask how she was doing or offer a few words of sympathy. But the support only made the pain deeper. It was as if everyone recognized the injustice. Everyone saw what had happened, but no one could fix it. Aisha carried a mixture of anger and humiliation that wouldn't leave her. That broken phone wasn't just a shattered piece of glass and plastic. It felt like a symbol of her dignity, left in pieces in front of her classmates. The administration knew about the incident by now. In a small office, behind closed doors, the principal and a few staff members discussed what had happened. Miss Thompson was known for her strict ways, and many of her colleagues respected her for it. But this time, they weren't so sure. A few teachers spoke up, saying that maybe, just maybe, Miss Thompson had gone too far. One teacher mentioned that, yes, students should respect rules, but smashing a student's phone seemed extreme. Others worried about the example it set. Was this really the way to show students the importance of respect? As the whispers grew louder, the administration decided to open an investigation. Word of this spread quickly, adding fuel to the already smoldering fire of curiosity and controversy. Students and teachers alike began to feel the tension. Rumors swirled that Ms. Thompson might be suspended, while others speculated she would face no consequences at all. The uncertainty only added to the sense of drama, like everyone was waiting for the next chapter in a story they couldn't stop reading. For Aisha, the waiting was unbearable. Every day she had to sit in class, pretending to focus, while her mind was consumed by what had happened. She couldn't shake the feeling of injustice, and a new thought started creeping into her mind. What if she did something about it? What if she didn't just wait for the administration to make a decision? The more she thought about it, the more a sense of determination grew within her. But Aisha wasn't the only one affected by the incident. Miss Thompson, sitting alone in her home one evening, replayed the events in her mind. She had always prided herself on her control, her authority in the classroom, but now she felt a strange unease. Had she crossed a line? She'd seen students use their phones countless times, but something about that day had triggered a reaction she couldn't explain. Aisha's quiet defiance, her focus on the phone instead of the lesson. It had felt like a challenge, like her authority was slipping away. Now, though, with all eyes on her, Miss Thompson wondered if that moment of anger had been a mistake. She knew the school was reviewing the incident, that her colleagues and students were questioning her actions. The thought unsettled her deeply. She had always believed her methods were justified, that discipline was necessary for learning. But for the first time, she found herself questioning what she had done and wondering what the consequences might be. Meanwhile, Aisha's parents had also been drawn into the storm. When they learned what had happened, they were furious. They knew the importance of respecting authority, but couldn't believe a teacher would go so far as to destroy their daughter's property. That weekend, they called the school, demanding answers. The administration assured them the situation was being handled, but Aisha's parents weren't satisfied. They wanted justice for their daughter, and they wanted to make sure this never happened to another student again. As pressure from Aisha's parents grew, the school felt the need to address the issue publicly. A notice was sent out, stating that the school was taking the matter seriously and would be conducting a thorough review of the incident. But the notice only seemed to fuel more questions. Students whispered in the hallways, parents discussed it over dinner, and the entire community seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. The school eventually scheduled a meeting to discuss the incident, inviting Aisha's parents, Miss Thompson, and a few key members of the administration. The air was thick with tension as everyone gathered in a small conference room, each person bringing their own perspective and emotions to the table. Miss Thompson sat across from Aisha and her parents, her face a mixture of regret and resolve. Aisha's parents spoke up first, expressing their disappointment and frustration, their voices trembling with emotion. They demanded answers, a clear explanation of why their daughter had been humiliated in front of her peers. Miss Thompson sat silently, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. For the first time, she didn't have a response, didn't have the justification she once thought she had. The administration listened carefully, trying to navigate the delicate balance between supporting their staff and addressing the concerns of a family who felt wronged. The meeting ended with no clear resolution, only a promise from the administration to consider all perspectives and come to a fair decision. But for Aisha, the aftermath was far from over. She left that meeting feeling a strange mixture of satisfaction and frustration. She had spoken her truth, had confronted the people who had hurt her, but she still didn't feel the closure she was seeking. As days turned into a week, Aisha's anger grew stronger. The broken phone and the humiliation she had suffered in front of her classmates replayed over and over in her mind. Every night, she would stare at the empty space on her desk where her phone once sat, and the memory of her teacher smashing it to pieces would come rushing back. She thought about all the things she could have done differently. Maybe she should have put the phone away sooner. Maybe she should have spoken up in that moment. But none of that seemed to matter now. The damage was done, and she felt like nothing was going to change unless she took action herself. Aisha began to think about how she could make things right, not just for herself, but for others who might face similar treatment. She knew she wasn't the only one who had felt the sting of unfair discipline in that school. Stories from friends and whispers in the hallways told her that there were other students who had felt mistreated or silenced. But now, she wanted to do something about it. She wanted to make a statement that would show everyone, including her teacher, that respect goes both ways. Late one night, Aisha sat down with a notebook and started writing. She wasn't sure exactly what her plan was yet, but she knew she had to do something. Her first step was to put her feelings into words. She wrote about how the incident had affected her, the shame and anger she felt, and her belief that students deserved respect, even when they made mistakes. She crafted her words carefully, knowing that whatever she wrote could become a powerful statement, something that might finally open people's eyes to what she had gone through. As she wrote, an idea began to take shape. What if she didn't keep this to herself? What if she shared her story in a way that others couldn't ignore? She decided that she would write an open letter to the school board, to the teachers, and even to the students who had seen her humiliation firsthand. But this wouldn't be just any letter. It would be a call for change, for justice, for respect. She wanted her words to reach everyone, to make them understand the impact of what had happened, and to show them why this wasn't just about a broken phone. The next day, Aisha arrived at school with her letter in her backpack. Her heart raced as she walked through the hallways, clutching the paper tightly. She knew this wasn't going to be easy, that she was taking a risk by speaking out. But she also knew she couldn't stay silent anymore. She approached her friends first, sharing the letter with them, and explaining her plan. As they read her words, their eyes widened. They saw her pain, her determination, and they understood why this mattered so much to her. They offered their support, promising to stand by her no matter what happened next. With newfound courage, Aisha took the letter to the administration office, asking the secretary to deliver it to the principal and the school board. She also shared a copy with the school newspaper, hoping that her story would reach as many people as possible. She wanted her voice to be heard, not just by the people in power, but by everyone who walked the halls of that school. This was her way of fighting back, of demanding the respect she felt she had been denied. The response was almost immediate. By lunchtime, students were talking about Aisha's letter, passing around copies that had somehow found their way into the hands of almost every student in the school. The letter had struck a nerve, and it wasn't long before teachers and administrators were discussing it too. Some teachers saw her words as a brave stand for justice, while others felt uncomfortable, wondering if they, too, had ever crossed a line with a student. The letter had opened up a conversation that no one could ignore. For Ms. Thompson, the letter was like a slap in the face. She read Aisha's words carefully, feeling a mixture of guilt and defensiveness. In the letter, Aisha described how Ms. Thompson's actions had made her feel small, powerless, and disrespected. Aisha hadn't attacked Ms. Thompson personally, but her words painted a vivid picture of the hurt she had endured. Ms. Thompson felt exposed, like everyone could see the side of her she had always tried to keep hidden. For the first time, she saw the incident from Aisha's perspective, and it shook her deeply. Meanwhile, Aisha's letter had caught the attention of the school board. They scheduled a special meeting to discuss the incident and invited Aisha to speak. Standing before the board, Aisha felt nervous but determined. She recounted what had happened, her voice steady yet full of emotion. She explained why respect was important to her, how it should be mutual, regardless of age or position. The board members listened intently, their expressions a mixture of surprise and concern. Aisha's words had made them see the issue differently. As word of Aisha's story spread, it reached beyond the school walls, drawing the attention of local community leaders and even some journalists. Her story resonated with people who had experienced similar injustices in their own lives, and her bravery inspired others to speak out. The school became the center of a wider discussion on authority, respect, and the balance of power between students and teachers. For Aisha, the days that followed were both overwhelming and empowering. She had taken a stand, and people had listened. She had shown that even in the face of humiliation and injustice, she could find the strength to speak out and demand change. Her actions had sparked a movement within the school, a call for mutual respect and understanding that echoed in the conversations of students and teachers alike. The day after Aisha's letter went public, the atmosphere at school was electric. Everyone knew that something had shifted. Teachers walked the halls with tense faces, students whispered excitedly between classes, and all eyes seemed to be on Aisha. The school administration had received her message loud and clear, but Aisha felt that wasn't enough. She wanted Ms. Thompson to understand the impact of her actions, not just from a letter, but in a way that left a lasting impression. Aisha's friends could sense her determination, and soon they, too, were caught up in her plan. They spent hours brainstorming, thinking of ways to show Ms. Thompson that her actions had consequences. They'd wanted her to see that respect couldn't be one-sided, that students also deserved dignity. The plan that began to form in Aisha's mind was one that would send a message loud enough for everyone to hear. The next morning, Aisha and her friends arrived early, slipping into the school while the hallways were still quiet and empty. They had a mission, and they knew exactly what to do. They left anonymous notes on the lockers of their classmates, each one echoing the words from Aisha's letter. Respect should go both ways. Authority without compassion is nothing. Our voices matter. Each note carried a message of resilience and respect, a reminder that students weren't there to be silenced. As students arrived, they found the notes waiting for them, and soon enough, the entire school was buzzing with curiosity and excitement. The messages resonated with students who had felt powerless, who had felt overlooked. The notes weren't just a statement. They were a declaration, a call for unity that made everyone feel a little braver. But that was just the beginning. During the first period, Miss Thompson's classroom was unusually quiet. Her students sat with straight faces, their eyes unwavering. The energy in the room was tense, almost defiant, and she could sense something was different. She looked around, but no one would meet her gaze. It was as if they were all waiting for something she couldn't quite understand. Then, one of Aisha's friends raised his hand, breaking the silence. "Miss Thompson," he began, his voice steady, "how would you feel if someone took something valuable from you, without warning, and broke it in front of everyone?" Ms. Thompson's face paled slightly, but she maintained her composure. She didn't respond, unsure of how to handle this unexpected question. Before she could say anything, another student raised her hand, echoing the sentiment. "Wouldn't that make you feel small, disrespected?" The questions kept coming, each one hitting closer to the heart of what had happened. Each student, one by one, was speaking out, challenging her to reflect on her actions. They didn't shout, didn't accuse, they simply asked, each question more powerful than the last. Miss Thompson felt a wave of discomfort, realizing that she was no longer in control. This wasn't her typical classroom, where her authority ruled unchallenged. For the first time, she felt vulnerable, as if her students were turning the mirror back on her. As the questions hung in the air, Miss Thompson's mind raced. She had always believed in discipline, in maintaining a firm hand, but now she felt the weight of her actions in a way she hadn't before. The students' calm yet pointed questions left her shaken, forced her to see the situation from a new perspective. At lunch, Aisha's message continued to spread. In the cafeteria, students sat together, sharing their own stories of feeling disrespected, of moments when they felt their voices didn't matter. Aisha's bravery had given them courage, and now they were speaking up, finding strength in each other's experiences. It was no longer just about one broken phone. It was about fairness, about respect, about everyone's right to be treated with dignity. Then, when Miss Thompson walked into the cafeteria later that day, she found herself surrounded by her own words. Somehow, copies of her strict class rules had been posted on the walls, each one rewritten to reflect mutual respect rather than strict authority. "Respect will be shown to all," one rule read. Another one stated, "Discipline is not just for students, but for all who lead." Miss Thompson stared at the walls, taking in the words that now stared back at her. They were a reflection of the very values she had once tried to instill in her students, now reshaped to hold her accountable. The school administration quickly took notice. Teachers whispered in the hallways, sharing surprised glances as they saw the students' silent protest. Some teachers felt uneasy, questioning their own methods, while others felt a strange admiration for the courage the students were showing. The principal, who had been dealing with the fallout from Aisha's letter, knew that the situation had grown beyond what anyone could have anticipated. By the end of the day, Ms. Thompson was feeling the pressure like never before. She realized that her students weren't rebelling out of disrespect. They were holding her to the same standards she had imposed on them. It was a moment of clarity, a revelation that maybe, just maybe, she had been wrong. Maybe discipline wasn't about control, but about mutual understanding, about listening as much as teaching. In her last class that day, Ms. Thompson looked around at her students, their faces filled with anticipation, and she did something she had never done before. She apologized. Her voice was quiet but steady, as she admitted that she might have been too harsh, that she hadn't considered the effect of her actions on Aisha and everyone else who had witnessed it. For the first time, she lowered her guard, allowing herself to be vulnerable in front of her students. A silence fell over the room, but this time it wasn't tense. It was a moment of understanding, of mutual respect finally being acknowledged. The students nodded, some even smiling slightly, as they felt a weight lift from the room. They had accomplished what they had set out to do, not with anger, not with rebellion, but with unity and purpose. In the days that followed, the school felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something significant to happen. The students' actions, Aisha's letter, and Miss Thompson's rare apology had stirred up emotions that were impossible to ignore. The administration knew it couldn't simply move on from what had happened. There were too many eyes on them now. Students, teachers, parents, and even the wider community. Everyone wanted to know what would happen next, and whether the school would take a stand on respect and fairness. A special meeting was called, bringing together the principal, school board members, teachers, and representatives of the student body. The room was packed, the atmosphere tense and expectant. Aisha sat among her classmates, her heart racing. She could feel the weight of this moment, knowing it wasn't just about her anymore. It was about making sure that the values she had fought for would be upheld for everyone. Her friends sat beside her, a quiet show of solidarity and strength, each one determined to see this through. The principal opened the meeting, addressing the room with a sense of seriousness that wasn't often seen in school gatherings. He acknowledged that recent events had forced the school to reevaluate its approach to discipline and respect. He admitted that the incident had shown them the importance of listening to students, of understanding that authority needed to be balanced with empathy. His words were measured, but there was a genuine tone of reflection in his voice that caught everyone's attention. Then one of the school board members stood up, addressing the audience with a firm, respectful tone. She spoke about how students today faced unique challenges and pressures that didn't always exist in the past. She explained that, in light of recent events, the school would be reviewing its policies to ensure that respect and understanding became the foundation of all disciplinary actions. This announcement sent a ripple through the room. It wasn't just words. It felt like a real step toward change, a commitment to make sure what had happened to Aisha wouldn't happen again. Ms. Thompson sat quietly at the back of the room, her eyes lowered. She had come to realize the gravity of her actions, how one impulsive moment had triggered an entire movement. The students had shown her a side of respect she hadn't fully considered before, one that wasn't based on fear or obedience, but on mutual understanding. She hadn't expected her own students to be the ones to teach her that lesson, but she could no longer deny the truth of it. She knew she would have to change, to approach her role as a teacher with a new perspective. In response to Aisha's letter and the students' actions, the school administration implemented a set of new guidelines focused on respect and student-teacher relationships. They introduced conflict resolution training for teachers, giving them tools to handle challenging situations without resorting to punitive measures. Workshops were scheduled to help teachers and students understand each other better, to encourage empathy and open communication. These workshops aimed to create an environment where everyone felt valued, where discipline was seen as a pathway to growth, not as a punishment. The school's announcement of these changes spread quickly, reaching the parents and community members who had been following the story closely. Some parents expressed relief, feeling that the school was finally listening to their children's needs. Others, particularly those who had witnessed Aisha's journey, felt inspired by her courage. The changes in school policy were a testament to the power of speaking out, a recognition that students' voices could indeed lead to meaningful change. But it wasn't just the school that felt the effects of Aisha's stand. The students themselves experienced a shift in their mindset. A sense of empowerment took root among them, a feeling that they didn't have to accept things that felt wrong. They had seen firsthand what could happen when they stood together, and that realization gave them a newfound sense of agency. Students who had once felt invisible or overlooked now felt like they could make a difference, that their words and actions mattered. Aisha's fight for respect had ignited a spark, and that spark continued to burn brightly, fueling a spirit of unity and resilience throughout the school. For Aisha, the changes brought a quiet satisfaction. She knew she had done something important, something that would last beyond her time at the school. Walking through the hallways, she noticed subtle differences in how teachers interacted with students, how they listened more, how they made an effort to show respect even in moments of discipline. It wasn't a complete transformation. There were still challenges, still moments of tension. But it was a start. And for Aisha, that was enough. Ms. Thompson, on the other hand, faced her own personal reckoning. She had to confront the part of herself that had clung so tightly to authority, that had believed discipline was the only way to maintain respect. In the weeks that followed, she struggled with this inner conflict, questioning the principles she had once taken for granted. She began attending the workshops alongside her students, determined to learn from them, to understand the importance of respect from a new perspective. Her journey wasn't easy. Letting go of old habits rarely is, but with each passing day, she found herself softening, opening up to a new way of teaching and connecting with her students. The story didn't end there, though. The local news got hold of Aisha's letter, and soon, articles appeared, highlighting her story as an example of student activism. People from other schools, even from different towns, reached out, asking for copies of the policies the school had implemented. Aisha's story became a symbol of change, inspiring students and educators alike to consider their own approaches to respect and authority. For the school, the changes continued to evolve. Student council meetings became more focused on giving students a voice, and the administration made it a priority to gather student feedback regularly. They wanted to create a culture where students felt heard, where they didn't have to resort to acts of defiance to make their voices count. Teachers, too, were encouraged to share their experiences and concerns, creating a dialogue that fostered understanding and growth on both sides.